We continue our ongoing contender series with a candidate for mayor in Knox County, Tennessee.
Absolutely. Glenn Jacobs is a former WWE wrestler. He went by the wrestling name of Kane, and now he's jumping in the political ring. See what we did there? Glenn joins us via Skype. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you for having me on.
So how does the political campaign compare to the pro wrestling world?
Well, they're both full contact sports, for sure. But I've actually had a lot of fun campaigning and meeting people and getting out. That's the great thing about local campaigns is it's really grassroots, and you get to meet a lot of people and folks in your communities and figure out what's on their mind and what's really going on, things that they're concerned about.
Do you think that this president has made the crossover from entertainment into politics easier? Did that sort of encourage you to jump into this race? Do you see more candidates following in those footsteps?
I think the current political environment is very conducive to people who are, for lack of a better term, outsiders and who haven't been in politics before. Um, Nationally, I believe that's what we're seeing. It's just folks are sick and tired of politicians, and they want something different. They want people that are outside that have new and fresh ideas that they don't feel have been corrupted by the system. And I think more than anything, that's what I see. And of course, when I look strategically, could I win this race? That's something that I definitely took into account. I mean, years ago, I don't know if that would be possible for someone like me to do this, but now it is because of this really groundswell of anti-incumbency, really anti-establishment that's going on throughout the country.
Glenn, you are a libertarian. In what ways do you break with the GOP, and perhaps in what ways do you align with some Democrat issues? And what is your political breakdown?
Well, I'm a Republican. I would consider myself a Reagan Republican. When we use the term libertarianism, that's what Ronald Reagan said was the heart of conservatism, and I believe that. We look at fiscal conservatism and free markets and individual liberty, and that's where the Republican Party should be. And I think that for a time, especially over the past several decades after Reagan, I think that maybe perhaps the Republican Party in some ways had lost some of those very fundamental principles, and I believe that more of the people like me and other folks like Rand Paul are able to pull the party back in that direction. I think that's good for everybody.
What's your position on the president's trade policies? That's an area where he's obviously broken with the sort of free market, traditional conservative approach.
I'm sorry, what was the question? I didn't.
Trade policy? The trade war?
I don't think that the tariffs are necessarily a great idea by any stretch of imagination. I think the other day I saw a tweet from the president, which I thought was exceptional, though, in which he said that he challenged the EU to drop all their tariffs and drop all their barriers and let's have free trade. And I thought that was a challenge that the EU should take up. Free trade is good for everybody. Unfortunately, I think that what's happened is people are reacting to the fact that America, in many ways, the U.S. Don't feel that we have had a free trade policy, and so now we have had retaliatory tariffs, and I don't know if that's necessarily the best policy. Because that does end up hurting consumers here in the U.S. and producers. So I would certainly hope that we could have policy of free trade with all countries.
I know you're a deep thinker. You've been writing about politics for a while, particularly on economic policy. But given your past career as Kane, do you ever have people who come up to you and say, this is really beyond you? What qualifications do you have to run for office?
Well, of course, you always have that from your critics. But in the end, I think it's the ideas that matter and our ability, my ability to put those ideas in motion. And the funny thing is that I think that often people that are in politics are the ones that have the hardest time doing that. I come from a business background, so I understand business. worked for one of I worked for a company that went from being a small regional promotion to now a worldwide internet juggernaut in entertainment, and was able to see how that was done. I mean, Linda McMahon, who at one point was president, CEO, president of WWE, is now the Small Business Administrator of the United States of America. So certainly in that respect, I can take the lessons that I learned from watching the expansion of WWE and the sound business principles that they engaged in and applied to local government.
So Glenn, I was a big fan of WWF when I was growing up, a little before you know, broke on the scene, like late 80s. I was really, really into it, and my sisters too, and we go to all the, you know, the local shows, we go to the big shows. You mind if I ask you a wrestling question?
Sure, go ahead.
So my favorite was always the Royal Rumble, and I know you have the record for the most cumulative Royal Rumble knockouts, which is amazing. How do you prepare, like how do you game that whole thing out? What does the preparation for Royal Rumble look like?
It's a lot. That's a complex match. You know, everything that we do in WWE is to try to entertain our audience as best that we can, and that's what we try to do in the Royal Rumble as well as our other shows. I'm not going to get into specifics because that would be revealing trade secrets.
Oh, okay.
But nevertheless, in the end, that's what it's all about.
Do you miss wrestling, Glenn?
Do I miss it? You know, in some respects, I do. You know, it's always great to go out and entertain people. I did that for such a long time. You know, it's part of my life. So yeah, I think I'll always miss it, and that'll always be part of me.